Hey, everyone. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Locked On Lakers. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky. The Lakers lose to the Clippers on Friday night. LeBron James answers questions about rumors and his relationship to the Lakers. A lot going on as we head into the weekend. We'll talk about all of it next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, and Andy, sometimes on Saturday. We are wonderful people. We really are getting fresh content up for you. We'll get to LeBron here in a second because he sat and answered questions about all the controversy that has been swirling about. But let's do the game first because one of the few bits of intrigue I guess still left for the Lakers in the last 24 to 25 games, whatever it is where they could finish. Could they jump up to a 7 seed, an 8 seed, whatever it might be? They sucked some of the drama out of that one real quick because Friday's loss to the Clippers, 105-102, doesn't guarantee that they won't jump above them in the standings, but it puts them 2.5 games behind the Clippers and also gives the Clippers the tiebreaker. So they'd have to
holy hell, they got to win this next game next week.
Oh God,
damn.
Yeah, I mean that goes without saying, but they'd have to pass them clean at this point. The Lakers now we really should be much more concerned about the catastrophic possibility of them missing the play-in entirely than we are about can they catch the Clippers or the Timberwolves for the 7 and 8. The Lakers are now 3.5 games in front of Portland. 2.5 games? I'm sorry, in front of Portland for the 10, and then 3.5 in front of San Antonio and New Orleans. These games that they play against San Antonio and New Orleans become real interesting over the next week. I got 2 games against New Orleans over the next month.
Well, that's just your crappy attitude, Brian. I'm still thinking about the 6th seed.
That's right.
Only 7 games, baby. We can do it.
As our friend Harrison Fagan pointed out, trolling everyone on Twitter on Friday night, you really can't judge this team until Avery Bradley is healthy and back.
Season keeps restarting.
That's right. So this game was really a perfect encapsulation of the Lakers season. As I put out on Twitter at Cam Brothers, it was monumentally on brand. Almost, I was specifically referring to the ending, but really the entire game. The Lakers, as they do, Andy, fell behind by 16. They came back and then completely forgot how to score. They scored 4 points over the final 4 minutes of the game. And, there was controversy about replays and this. Lakers couldn't score. They could not get a bucket to save their flipping lives, which has basically been a problem all year long.
Well, it was also, Brian, the way the game was bookended because the first quarter, they also could not score. They were 0 for 11 from behind the arc to start this game. LeBron finally got one to fall on the team's 12th attempt. And in terms of just how nothing comes easy for this team, or sometimes nothing even seems to make sense for this team, in the first half of the game, when the Lakers were truly struggling to score, I actually thought they were executing their offense reasonably well. And
they got open looks. The looks were not bad.
Not just open looks, Brian, wide open looks that they could not get to drop. In the second half, they started scoring more and actually took the lead in this game, despite the fact that I think on balance, they were sloppier in the second half than they were.
You know what they did, though? I will say that I agree with you that they were a little bit looser and a little bit sloppier, but what they did do was speed things up. And that will sometimes create sloppiness, create turnovers and loose play and things like that. They sped the game up considerably, which is part of the reason they were able to actually score in the third quarter. They had a huge third quarter where they took the lead. They had a 5-point lead in this game, heading down the stretch in the fourth quarter. And then decided to stop scoring as strategy. But when they were retaking the lead, 31-15 in the third quarter, you'd figure, what are we, 60 games in? I would know better. I was thinking to myself, like, this is one of those, like, put up or shut up quarters, like moments where the team has got to step up and do it. And like they overcame this deficit. THT, I was like, it's a put up or shut up moment for the team. It's a put up or shut up moment for THT, who had a massive third quarter, really played well into the fourth, finished with 16 points. I think all of them were in the second half, correct?
Yes, they were.
16 points, 2 of 2 from 3-point range.
Carmelo Anthony played much better as the game went along. He was good. Mm-hmm. He was good in the second half. Last shot that or second to last shot for the Lakers that he basically airballed, notwithstanding awful execution of the final or second to last set for the Lakers. They were just kind of standing around waiting for LeBron.
They were waiting for the double. LeBron, I think, was waiting for the double, which came. Yes. It was actually a triple, which came. And then, he swung the ball to Melo. It was not a great pass from LeBron.
Not a great game from LeBron.
I think Melo had a little bit more time. And we'll get to, I agree with you, because LeBron, I think Melo had a little bit more time than he thought. And the Lakers actually did, because they're only down by 1 at that point, have a setup. I believe it was, I forget who was in the corner for the Clippers, because Covington was on LeBron, but he could have either tried to swing it to THT in the corner, or Westbrook would have been alone underneath the basket completely by himself. So I mean, there was enough time to make one more pass, make one more action, whatever. And Melo just, I think, couldn't.
The whole possession was mush, man.
It was all bad. And it was good. They scored. It was a microcosm of everything we've seen. They scored 4 points down the stretch, over the last 4 minutes. You get a bucket somewhere in there, and man, we're not even going to spend any time talking about that call and all that stuff, because it's that to me isn't the issue. But you mentioned
more
LeBron,
weird than truly important,
right? And Lakers ended up getting the ball right back anyway. So you mentioned LeBron. Earlier in the week when we talked about like what needs to happen for the Lakers to win these games while Anthony Davis is out, is like you need really good play from Russell Westbrook, who was fine, didn't turn the ball over, only had 1 assist, which is a little weird for him, 9 of 21 from the floor.
He only had 1 assist in part because for a long time nobody could
Lakers couldn't hit a shot. Right. I mean, they shot. I actually thought they shot 26% from 3 and 42% overall
fine in this game.
He was fine. That's why I think that was a perfectly fair evaluation that I gave. He was fine. LeBron, though, as you mentioned, was not good. No. And that cannot happen if the Lakers are going to win.
Yeah, 6 of 18 from the field, 2 of 8 from behind the arc. Did have 11 rebounds, but 6 turnovers. He was sloppy with the ball. Like, honestly, it felt like he had more than 6 turnovers, and 6 is pretty high.
Against 3 assists. Yeah, Lakers only had 18 assists on 39 makes, which is very low with your home scorer. That's bad.
Yeah, and it was not a great game from LeBron. And this is a stretch right now where, fair or not, they really, really need LeBron to be at the top of his game at all times, because good contributions from THT and Melo and Westbrook still just may not be enough. Dwight Howard actually played very well.
Had a really nice game. 26 minutes, 14 points, 16 rebounds, 3 blocks.
Yeah, well, it felt too like he had 7 offensive rebounds. It felt like he had like 50 because they kept missing everything. But it just
many opportunities.
This was a really demoralizing, brutal loss for the Lakers. There's no way around this. They needed this badly.
Yeah, because I mean, the difference between the 7 and the 8 is significant. I don't think. I mean, I'm sorry, the 8 and the 9. And I don't think the Lakers are going to be able to catch Minnesota. Although the Timberwolves got annihilated by the Harden Embiid Sixers on Friday. I still just don't. I don't think the Lakers are too far behind there. But there's a big difference between 2 chances to win 1 game and you're through versus you got to win them both. And, it's not like these team has put together a bunch of win streaks over the course. 2 really constitutes a streak for the 2021-22 Lakers. They did do some stuff with the lineup. Frank Vogel with Avery Bradley unavailable. Kendrick Nunn obviously still out. He shuffled the starting lineup around a little bit. He finally did start Austin Reeves, played 33 minutes. Did Austin Reeves stuff throughout most of the game. And Dwight Howard started, and we mentioned that. So, I mean, they're still throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. But you see the deficiencies in this team, particularly their ability to score on a night where LeBron isn't dominant and a guy like Malik Monk is off. And Malik's entitled to have a tough game now and then. And you don't want to necessarily have to rely on him to give you 23 a night going forward. Like, they're going to need Melo, who did perform. They're going to need THT. But they also need more out of 40% of the starting lineup than the 8 points they got out of Ariza and Reeves.
Yeah, and they also, I mean, those guys took 9 shots between them. They need to be taking more. They need to be looking for their offense more, especially in a night where the offense just isn't coming. And, you mentioned the 4 points in the last 4 minutes down the stretch. I mean, that's where you really, or it's one of the many areas, but I think one that felt really significant where it's not happening for LeBron, because a lot of the fourth quarter execution is going to really come down to how does LeBron execute? I mean, that's just the burden that he's carrying right now with this team.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit about LeBron, who, addressing the media, did talk about all the stuff that's been going on. There was a report on ESPN that Rich Paul, I think we mentioned, did we mention this in the podcast? Rich Paul met with earlier in the week with management and made it clear that they're not trying to get like Rob fired or the rabbi fired.
There was another report from Sam Amick from The Athletic confirming that with a little bit more details about a meeting that happened Tuesday earlier in the week.
It's all of this stuff is very interesting to me just because so much of it is almost like listening to politicians and lawyers. Knocking down sort of knocking down straw men or like creating things that weren't necessarily part of the reporting. And obviously, LeBron talked a lot about how, he says a couple innocent things and the media as a whole starts running with them. He did say that he is here. He, envisions himself as a Laker until he's done. The Bronny stuff, I guess, being the bit of a wild card there, but he said, I don't even know if that's going to be something that can happen. Acknowledging what you said, I think it was for Friday's show, that like, you don't know when Bronny's going to be in the NBA. It's not like a guaranteed one and done thing. And LeBron seemed to acknowledge that on Friday. That said, Andy, unless you disagree, I don't think any of this means that all the stuff that came out last week, through the All-Star break and whatever, was fake. I think it's all designed to make sure that something happens over the course of this offseason to make.
Well, here's how you know, Brian, that it's not all fake, because a lot of the reporters that, really dug into this, they spoke to people on the Lakers side. You could tell that they were sourcing from the Lakers, and none of the sourcing reported out, the hell you people talking about? There's no problems between us. We're fine. Like, I mean, you don't meet with the brass. Like, Rich Paul does not meet with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka for a sit down if there's nothing to talk about at all. You know what I mean? Like, if this was just a game of reporter telephone, Rich Paul would have just called Rob Pelinka or called Jeannie or called both of them and said, look, I don't know where this came from. Bron isn't mad about anything. Cool. Like you guys know we're not upset about anything. Clearly people, I mean, I know just from talking a little bit with people who've done more of the digging than us, I know that there were people on the Lakers side concerned about this. I mean, It's just obvious from the reporting that there has been tension.
And here's the thing, like this, it's a pattern for LeBron, the sort of the passive aggressive sort of putting teams on notice and things like that. As you, I think, made the point first on Friday, like there's some sense that, that team LeBron probably wanted to dial some of this back a little bit. That it was
I think the reaction and the backlash was even acknowledging, obviously, this all began with intentionality from LeBron. And it's really interesting, too, because really all of this began with Dave McMenamin from ESPN, his report refuting Rob Pelinka's comments that LeBron and Anthony Davis, both Clutch clients, were in alignment with Rob Pelinka's decision not to do anything at the deadline.
I still think that none of this happens if Rob doesn't say that.
Sure.
Or it's very muted if it happens.
Well, yeah, probably. But the point being, though, that whether that came from LeBron, whether it came from AD, whether it came from Clutch, somebody on that side gave that to Dave McMenamin for a reason. Mm-hmm. And that's really the genesis of all of this. Like, even if you think the media ran with this too much and that this became a bigger story than was merited, and because of that, people took LeBron's comments about Les Snead, which he said afterwards, like, look, the F them pick shirt, I thought it was a cool shirt. That's my attitude towards this, by the way. That was Rob's attitude.
Right. He pointed out that Pelinka's traded. They did trade a draft pick for Russ.
Look,
I kind of wish they hadn't, but they did.
Look, I actually said this during Friday's show, Brian. You can make an argument that the Lakers have been too active in terms of moves that they've made since LeBron arrived. Since LeBron arrived, the only Laker still on the roster is LeBron. They've literally moved everybody who was ever on the roster since LeBron arrived. So you can't accuse them of sitting on their hands, but there was obviously some knowing intention from LeBron because he's too smart. He knows how these things are going to be received because he's aware of what was being said leading up to this. Even if you think that the media ran with it more than was merited, right? They didn't run with it based off nothing.
Retiring as a Cav, I think we made the point. It's like it could be a one-day contract, it could be 3 years from now, it could be 5 years from now, it could be but like that doesn't necessarily mean it. Playing with Bronny, okay, that's not necessarily, but like you put all these things together, and there's no currency in having this conversation every day, whether it doesn't help the Lakers, it doesn't help Clutch, it doesn't help LeBron. And so to try to put the fire out and just let things settle until either this season becomes an even bigger tire fire, which is possible. I hate pointing that out, but it is possible. Or the off season comes and they can start the process of trying to fix it. That's when this will happen. All right. Well, it's a lot more that we'll get into over the course of over the course of the next week. The Lakers now turn to when do they play again? Is that Sunday? Sunday against Nolans. Mm-hmm. A big game against the Pelicans. If you don't want them chasing you down and if you don't want us to talk about, hey, they could miss the play-in entirely, go win the Pelican game.
Plus, they're honoring Stu Lance that night. You want to win for Stu.
For Stu.
Stu deserves it.
But, Andy, before we go, it's very important that we tell people about the following.
First of all, that Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Built Bar. February is almost done, which means your New Year's resolutions have been long tossed out the window. But do not bail out on eating right, because Built Bar makes it easy. Have you tried the Puffs? If you have not, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting items. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat covered in 100% real chocolate. Great flavors like cinnamon Cheerio, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. Again, all covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. That's the good stuff. Always great taste combinations. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCKED15, 15% off at Built.com.
When you have churros and when you have Cheerios, you get Cheerios. Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Bet Online. Football, Andy, it's over for the season, but basketball, it's in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From the latest odds, totals, and player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. That one could be relevant to Lakers fans. BetOnline.net is, I'm just saying, It's the number one spot. Am I wrong? It's the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. It's important to emphasize the local angle for all of these things. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right down to all they had the Olympics. They got everything coming up this summer. It's just the place to be. So head on to the website today. Yes. Head on to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online where the games start. All right, so more coming up on Monday's game. We'll see where this thing goes, and it's going to be a real interesting week in Lakerland. Thanks, everybody, for stopping in with this bonus episode. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Lakers on YouTube. See everybody Monday.